We're on. What is shaking, y'all? Never done before in the history of the Golden Mic. 2 Golden Mics, 1 day, because it's a very special day. Not only do we have great things going on in New York with what Trisha Brooke has, but it is also National Single Parent Day. And
yes, it is.
I, as a single parent, have never celebrated this day, so it's on. Jennifer, good to see you. Willie Bannister, it is good to see you as well. We're gonna start the watch party, and Tonia, I already gave your name away. I was supposed to keep it shrouded, so fuck that. I'm gonna start and keep it shrouded. So our guest today,
I love it.
Our guest today is the founder of the Single Parent Summit. She's also the founder of the Recovering Church Girls, which I think is the best name ever.
Thank you.
She's a good buddy it feels like forever, but maybe like a year and a half, something like that.
It feels like way more than that in all the best ways, I might say.
In all the best ways. Mama's fueled by coffee and better by wine. And she lives in Philadelphia, and she has 2 wonderful teenagers. One of them is a 16-year-old who is actually her podcast techie. So I can't wait for Zach to grow up. My friend and founder again of the Single Parent Summit, Tonia Adleta. Tonia, you look like you're behind some sort of you're in some sort of backstage area right now. What's going on with you?
I am part of a mastermind for speakers. So very similar to what Trisha was just talking about. I love Trisha and all of the work that she is doing. So I am at a live event in Chicago. I literally just ran off stage so that I could come and jump on this call with you. So thank you again for working with the crazy schedule and all the things. But let's be honest, this is why I've got such great makeup on right now, because otherwise, you'd be really lucky if I got some mascara on.
That's why you wanted to do the show, because your makeup and your hair's banging today. You gotta show the viewers your shoes today, by the way. You gotta show the viewers your shoes.
I totally will.
Laura, Dorothy,
we'll have to do that right now.
Jay, we see you. We see you guys. So thanks for joining the watch party. Look at the shoes, y'all. Look at the shoes.
Aren't they cute?
Those are some ass-kicking single-parent shoes. Bev, I see you.
Damn straight.
Thanks for joining us today. So we did want to dedicate this episode for single parents, people who have been affected by single parents, because there's just so many different things that go on, and we tend to forget about the impact that single parents have on our lives, or the impact that we have just as single parents. So Tonia, I know that you organized this whole thing with the Single Parent Summit. Why is that something that's important to you?
Thank you so much just for that idea. And by the way, nobody knows that it's National Single Parent Day. And here's the deal. This was named as a national holiday back in 1984. So here we are 35 years later, and nobody knows about it. Nobody's talking about it. And at the same time, if you look at all of the stats, the most recent being in 2018, there are a reported 19.65 million children in America who live with a single parent family. So here we are, 35 years after this national holiday has been declared, with 19.65 million children affected, and nobody knows about it. So that's part of this thing. It's the idea of, there's 2 reasons why I started the Single Parent Summit. One is because what I wanted to find in some sort of a community, and, how do I become a better person so that I can become a better parent, so that I can help my kids become their best versions of themselves. I couldn't find that. And so a friend kind of threw out a challenge and said, well, why don't you make it? So there was that.
And usually when Adleta gets a challenge, she usually does try to make it happen. Yep.
I have to be careful who I hang out with, because who knows what challenges I could end up with. So yeah, this is true. But then the second piece is really this idea of, finding community and being really intentional about that. The kinds of groups that were out there for single parents were really Bash the Ex. And, here's why I can never get ahead of life and how I'm always going to be the victim, and all of that kind of a thing. And I was like, but I believe that life doesn't have to look that way. So how do we create a community that's really based around we are who we are, our circumstances are what they are, and we have the ability to change. We can co-create something new.
Absolutely love it. Nathan, Emily, Linda, Ashley, Gabrielle, I see you guys there. Thank you for tuning in. You've got quite the audience on the watch party today.
So
I
grateful for you guys. Thank you.
well, I wanted to do this. I usually do something on my show that has to do with hearts and feeling happy and positive psychology, but I'm going to do something a little bit different today. For those of you who have been proudly raised by a single parent, I want you to hit that heart button. I want you to hit that heart button. Let us know. Let us know if you've been raised by that single parent, and give them some love. Give them a little tribute by hitting that heart button right now. Now, here's the other thing. You haven't been on my show yet, have you?
I have, but it was ages
That
ago.
was
So we've been
ages ago.
talking about
Okay.
doing it again.
So I
Yeah.
do the wow face for something else, but we're gonna do it today
Yes.
for single parents themselves. If you are a single parent, hit that wow face, and you and I are Tanya, so we're
I know.
gonna
I was
have
like,
to make
how
it
do I hit?
ourselves.
How do I hit the button? I can't do it with both hands because I have to hold the phone.
Don't drop it.
Yeah, that would be bad.
Dorothy's already tuning in saying, love this, Tanya. I was a single parent for a few years, and I have so much respect for single parents. Love it. Love it.
Thank you.
Lisa, we see you. We see you reacting, Lisa. Benjamin, we see you. Kelly, I mean, this is a party today. This is a party today.
Well, and here's the thing. It's like, when do we ever get the chance to celebrate ourselves? And so this could easily, self-care is a big, big thing for me. And the idea of accepting yourself and loving yourself. And it's not this frou-frou thing that everybody tries to make it out to be. Like,
Yeah.
when I say self-care, I'm not talking about bubble baths and dark chocolate truffles and wine, although I love all of those things. But what I'm talking about is being able to really know yourself, to have that self-discovery, to have that self-awareness, because then we can start to identify the things that are running in our mind that don't actually serve us and weren't our choice to begin with. So when you take this idea of this is, I think, where both of us totally, cross over into each other's space, when we can apply the principles of positive psychology and think about how we think about ourselves, then we have all the power to create something different.
Yep.
Then when you take all of that and you put it into this context of being a single parent, everyone that I know knows a single parent. It is completely impossible to navigate life, at least in downtown, Main Street, USA anymore, without knowing a family that has, whether it's single parents, whether it's co-parenting, blended families, all of these things. And yet we don't talk about it. And it's just kind of this thing where, I think that there's so much support. And we, as single parents, often think that we need to do everything ourselves.
Yeah.
We're not always very good at asking for help or receiving it. And here we've got people that are saying, we see you, we appreciate you, or maybe they've kind of forgotten that that's our dynamic and it's not even on their horizon. So I think there's a lot of different things that come into play when it's like, hey, this is my world and I am damn proud of myself and I'm proud of my kids and I'm proud of how we navigate life, and to be able to really celebrate that, because we just don't get a chance to talk about it very often.
Absolutely. You're breaking the internet right now because we got George tuning in. George, I'm going to butcher your last name. George Andriopoulos, tuning in. I love this message, Tanya. I was a single parent for 7 years, and I made sure to disrupt conventional dynamic of how two exes should interact. I'm loving this. This is the positivity that we need out there for our children's sake. My God, stand on that mountaintop and proclaim it, George. Awesome.
I love that.
Good enough. I came close. We got Lisa tuning in from Miami, just saying hey. Now, I think one thing that you did bring up is this idea of self-care. It often seems, I do know your story. And if I don't want to take away from it, but as a single parent, you worked 2 jobs at one point. Putting the kids first to the point where you had a major health issue. A major health issue
pretty
because
much.
of it. And how many of us I'll see you at Speakers Who Dare too, Jared George. And how many of us go through that where we become sort of the sole person with the responsibility. We're the breadwinner. We're coordinating things, and if we weren't Type A before, we're suddenly Type A, trying to get things done,
Yeah.
but also flying by the seat of our asses. And the next thing that
Mm-hmm.
you know, we haven't eaten for a full day. We haven't gotten the sleep that we need, and we collapse. We
I still
collapse.
do that
How
sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, self-care is like was let me go back. Was that how self-care looked to you before you had kids? Was it different, or like when you were a single parent did it completely change?
Yeah, I mean, everything completely changed when I became a single parent. And I think that that was part of the like, okay, wait a second. The entire ground underneath my feet has shifted and I don't know what's true anymore. I don't know what I believe. I remember having a complete breakdown in the master bathroom, just mourning the idea of I wanted my fairy tale ending. And, to make it even more ironic, I've been in the wedding industry for the last 20 years. So here I am as the now twice divorced wedding planner. And I still believe in love and I believe in romance and I believe in partnership. And at the same time, who I am now is a very different person than who I was at the end of each of those relationships. And so I think the only reason why I can say that so strongly and clearly is because of the self-care journey that I've been on. Because it really, I feel like the absolute foundational piece of self-care that people often miss is self-awareness. When you think
Mm.
about that idea, like, so think about this as a cashmere sweater. You know how it has like the little label and it tells you exactly how to wash your sweater without shrinking it, without getting those silly little pills
Oh
on
yeah.
the, like the, where it all,
Oh
that
yeah.
thing drives me crazy. So we know how to care for our sweater because there's directions on it and we know what the ingredients are from that label. If we would take that same kind of approach to know ourselves and to know how to care for ourselves, then all of a sudden life gets a little bit easier, or I should say simpler. Maybe it's not necessarily easy, but if I know that I tend to not eat in a regular schedule, so if I can do my meal prep once a week, and I can slice and dice my fresh vegetables or, whatever, and have it ready to go for those moments where I know, because I know myself that I'm going to get busy and I'm not going to drink enough water or I'm going to drink too much coffee or whatever. I can plan to backfill those kinds of tendencies within myself. But if I don't take the time, and that's not a silly, like I shouldn't say silly, but that's like a physical, easy, nutritional win. Where the real stuff happens, I feel like, is when you get into that time and
Mm-hmm.
place that you've created to intimately get to know yourself, know how you see yourself, know what influenced the way that you see yourself, which is why Recovering Church Girls exists. But really,
Ah.
to understand what has shaped who you are now, because when you do that, then you get all the power back because you can now shape who you are becoming, and your kids see that happen. And when they can be a part of that and when they can watch the transformation happen, that's the stuff that really gets me jazzed about all of this, because now we're talking about affecting an entire generation. It's not about us, it's about them.
So you weren't necessarily the mom that was like, I always have to show my kids that I'm strong 24/7.
Oh, I
Did you
totally
put out a
was.
little bit of vulnerability out there because um uh there is the typology that is like strong 24/7, and then go into the bathroom and have an all out cry, and then
Oh, yeah.
get out of the bathroom and then just shits back in order. Like, uh,
Yep.
are you the type that kind of is always in front of the kids, or do you let the guard down a little bit to show the transformation?
I think what has been really helpful for me is to do this kind of thing in terms of the vulnerability, the transparency, the conversations in age appropriate bites. So now my kids are 16 and 17, and we can have much different conversations than what we could have when they were 5 and 6. And that's how old they were when their dad and I separated.
Yeah.
So, at that point, that's when I'm working the two jobs, and, I am just hustling in every way possible. end up completely passed out on the bathroom floor because I've lost consciousness.
Yeah.
I have burned myself out to the point where I'm kind of trying to do the things that I think I'm supposed to do, but it was a life that I didn't even want.
Yeah.
So, that was the big aha for me of like, okay, hold on a second. I know two things for sure. I know that I want to do work that matters and do something, that's of value in the world. And I know I want more time with my kids. Because when you talk about, like the world changing thing, when you go from being the primary caregiver 100% of the time because you chose to put your career on hold while the kids were born and, while they were toddlers and such, and then all of a sudden you go from 100% of the time to 50% of the time, nothing will wake you up faster as a parent than that moment. And so even silly things like, I realized one time that by not only is it easier to go grocery shopping without a 5 and 6 year old, I realized that I was spending so much time doing all that like household life management stuff that I wasn't getting that time with my kids instead. So even just the way I was structuring the management of life, everything changed.
Yeah, Dorothy's...
But you can only do that for so long.
Right. And Dorothy's tuning in saying, God, there's so many parties going on right now. She's saying, yes, I agree. Taking care of yourself sets the example for our children. They truly learn by watching our behavior.
Absolutely.
And so that's a huge thing. It's a party, y'all. I can't control this. There's so many things that are going on at once right now. It's a big old party.
I love it.
So I'm going to throw out a couple other things that have been thrown out. Lisa, I see you over there in Miami, who threw out something huge, and I'm going to post it up here. Lisa Brang says, there's still a stigma of single parenthood among some groups. It's like we failed. Is that something that you felt? And everyone watching, I want you all to interact with this. Like, give me some thumbs up or thumbs down. Comment on what Lisa's been saying, because we are a community of single parents right now that are just celebrating this day together. So for you,
I love
Tonia,
it.
did you ever, like, I think you implied the stigma being in the wedding planning industry and being divorced. How did that stigma affect you? And how did it also affect the way that you approached parenting?
So many layers to that. And by the way, Lisa, I am so right there with you. The stigma it's real. And it's something that I think the more that we can talk about what our reality really is and also how we're changing it, I think that's where we get to change the narrative and we get to take control of the story that's being told instead of just playing the victim card or assuming that we're going to have terrible relationships with our ex or, any of these things that we can like fall into the continuation of that story. So when we can say, hey, first of all, I'm still here. And I think that's part of why I'm so obsessed right now with this idea of getting National Single Parent Day out there is because 35 years and no one's talked about it. We're still here.
Yeah.
We are still here. And there's probably way more of us now than there were 35 years ago.
Yeah.
So anyway, before I get back on that soapbox, the stigma for me, I felt it in a couple of different ways. One is, oh gosh, clearly the wedding industry, being in a place where, I love and here I am surrounded by it all the time. I'm the one that is handling every problem that's going to come up before it actually comes up. So my couple has no clue. But at the same time, I remember the very first wedding that I had after my kid's dad and I decided that this wasn't going to work out. And it was actually, make it even more emotional, it was for the babysitter that we had for a good 2 years of our life when my kids were really, really little and I was working from home. And so it's this family, that is getting married. And I got to the point where I had to duck out of the sanctuary, completely lose my shit in the foyer, and then pull myself back together so that I could be the one to open the doors up as they were coming back down the aisle and be the first ones to give them a huge hug and wish them all the happiness in the world. And so there's this duality of it where
Yeah.
it's like, I believe in love, I believe in them, and I'm going through my own personal heartbreak. So it's okay to have both. And I think that's a really important piece about recognizing the stigma and fighting against it at the same time. We can feel things that are in opposition, and it's okay. We don't have to be all one thing.
Yeah.
And then real quickly, because I'm sure there's a lot of good conversations here too. The second piece I think was going, second and third, church, definitely. This is something we're digging into on the podcast right now on Recovering Church Girls about being divorced in the church. So there's
Yowzers.
tons of stuff there. Yeah, seriously. But again, how it reflects on our value as human beings and especially as women, because then we got to get to the purity culture, and that's a whole nother subtext.
Yep.
So I'm not even going to go there. But the third piece was school. I remember going into the, like school events cafeteria, all the parents come and sit in the cafeteria and watch the award assembly or whatever. And I remember so many times just feeling so incredibly isolated because you go in and everyone is coupled. Everyone is coupled in the room. And so you feel like you've got all these eyes on you of, oh, that's, she
Yep.
must be a single mom. There's no, like that type of a thing.
Yep.
In reality, it was all in my head. Nobody was looking, nobody was pointing, but boy, did I feel like it.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would say that we don't have to go too far into culture, but coming from a pretty conservative Filipino culture, and being a single parent and people being like, the mother, wife, whatever is where, like it's this sort of passive thing, right?
Yeah.
It really got to me for a while. It really, really did get to me, and it got to me to such a point that, like what Lisa was talking about, the stigma had me feel like I was like undateable, like I was never gonna be able to date again. Like that was it. I had a son. No one wanted someone with the son, and so I just
Right.
need to get
All that
over it.
extra baggage, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
everything was it was all baggagey, and how much of cultural stigma, whether it be Filipino or a religious group, do we impose on ourselves and what we think people are thinking of us. I'd like to think, and if you guys are watching, give me a thumbs up if you agree, and something else if you disagree. Give me a middle finger if you disagree. I'd like to think that the stigma is becoming more acceptable, but I don't know if that's because of the fact that I've moved to places, like I lived in a place that was very conservative before, conservative part of Georgia, conservative part of Florida, and then kind of going to LA, like this is hyperbolic, but like babies are accessories, right? You like, it's like, oh, look at my kid, right? Play date. But like, do you see that the pendulum is swinging in terms of stigma?
I'd like to think so, but I
Yeah.
will be very quick to say that I am absolutely silver lining can always be found. Sometimes you just have to look a little bit harder
Yeah.
type of Pollyanna. So I clearly recognize that see, self-awareness, that's
Mm-hmm.
something that, is within myself. If I were to take the blinders off and take a bigger look, I think in some ways my concern is more about the narratives that go along with it. So while the stigma might be changing a bit and people are more willing to, kind of include us in the fold, so to speak, the question that I have comes into play with what are they expecting of me as a single parent? And maybe that's unfair. Like maybe it needs to be what I'm perceiving to be
Yeah.
the expectation. But again, this victimhood thing, like it's so strong. It
Yeah.
is such a strong pull to maintain victimhood. And, especially like when you're going through, if you're going through the divorce, or if there's like this nasty he said, she said, or, whatever the thing is, there is something in us that wants to be justified and wants to be validated that we've been wronged. And to get to the point where you can kind of draw the line in the sand and be able to say that that's the circumstance that happened. It is what it is. And now moving forward, I get a chance to take my power back, whatever that looks like, to know myself, to know what it is that I want to create in the world, to bring community around me, to be able to help facilitate that. And here I go. Well, that's a completely different conversation. And at that point, honestly, the stigma doesn't even matter
Yeah, it doesn't
anymore.
yet
You don't
matter.
see it.
It
because
doesn't
you're so
matter.
in love with your own life. You don't see what everybody might be,
Yeah,
behind
yeah.
the scenes type of a thing. And frankly, they're probably not, because they've all got their own lives to handle anyway.
Yeah, and anyone watching, if you've ever felt that victimhood mode, we can be honest here, right? Like, give me a thumbs up. Let me know that you've felt it. Have you felt the victimhood mode yourself? Okay, like
Yeah.
what was the moment for you in which you felt the power shift back to you? You felt the
Mm.
agency come back.
I think there have been a lot of moments throughout the journey. I think it's almost like again, kind of the self-awareness discovery process. I found that every time I get really, like deep in the work about whatever it is that I'm trying to overcome or understand about myself or whatever, I get to a new layer.
Hmm.
And then I experience oftentimes the same problem again, but now from a different perspective.
Hmm.
Same type of thing when it comes to undoing the tendency of being a victim. You need to be able to understand and to recognize what are the triggers in you that are going to fall back into that behavior, because it's so stinking easy. I mean, and we're talking about something as simple as, take road rage, for instance. Like,
Yeah.
you are out and you're driving along the road and somebody cuts you off. Where do you go in your mind? Is it immediately that, oh, that blah, 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 blah. I don't know, like how much we can cuss, but,
You
like,
can cuss all
are
you
you,
want.
like, are you ripping that person, a new one as you're driving, or are you giving them grace to say that, we don't know what's going on in their world.
Yeah.
This wasn't a personal affront. I'm safe. I'm fine. And I think safety is a big thing. I think sometimes that we perceive that we're not safe. And that's where we'll react even stronger to that victim piece, because we think that there's some injustice in the world. So for me, that was a big way of recognizing it and moving past it, of just kind of taking a moment and reminding myself, I'm safe. My kids are safe. We are fine. This is a difficult moment, but we will get through it. And just grounding myself back into that kind of connection again.
I love it. Um, let's go back to the second that you became a single parent, right? If you were to do it again, what would you change?
I still would do it. I mean, that doesn't
Hmm.
change at all. And I think, like, I remember a conversation. So my dad is the middle of 8 kids, and his parents divorced, back in the 50s. And talk about stigma.
Yeah.
Here's my grandmother now raising 8 children on her own. And this was, there's so many different things about society that has changed since then. So she put herself through sonography school. She's an amazing human being. She plays the same saxophone now that she bought when she was 17, and she plays in like jazz bands all the time. She's an amazing woman. Anyway, so I have a lot to look up to, in that capacity. But I think one of the hardest conversations at that stage was my dad, who had experienced this as a child. His first thing was, what about the kids?
Yep. Yep.
And without even thinking about it, my immediate answer was, yeah, Dad, what about the kids? What am I telling them is okay,
Yep.
or that they should aspire to in their own relationship about where I'm at right now? Like,
That's
what
huge.
about the kids? Is it good for them for me to stay? It's not. So I'm actually the one that chose to leave. And that brings a whole nother layer of guilt and drama. And again, internal victimhood, into that whole component. But
Hmm.
I think on a very practical matter, I was so anxious to get a clean slate and to start again that not so much legally, but financially, I shot myself in the foot. I just
Hmm.
wanted it to be done. I just wanted peace. I wanted closure. I wanted to be able to move on. And if I were to go into that, but this is a slippery slope, because if I were to go into that place of, here's what I deserve, or that type of a thing, that would have made it even more contentious. And it was
Yeah.
already difficult enough at that point. So, it comes to be a play. Like, did I leave money on the table? Probably.
Yep.
But are we now at a really healthy place co-parenting? Yeah. And it took us a
Good.
long time to get there, but I wouldn't trade where we are now
Sure.
for more money.
What
So,
about what about support? Because it's oftentimes a very lonely process, right? You might even lose friends, because of
oh
the
yeah.
the separation, right?
I don't know that there's a might to it. You will lose friends.
Yeah. So, in reflection, do you feel like you had the support? Do you feel like you had the precursor to the single parent summit at the time, or would you have opted into a single parent summit if there was one?
I'd like to think that I would have, but to be fair, it wasn't until I had my loss of consciousness moment and, kind of the falling out afterwards of going, okay, something about this isn't working. That was my entry into this self-discovery process, the self-improvement, the commitment to becoming the best version of myself. Without the trigger of that massive moment, I don't know that I would have gotten there because, I was a good mom and I loved what I was doing. And it's just like we were comfortable. Everything was safe. It was cozy.
Yeah.
Aside from, feeling unfulfilled in the relationship. So, there comes to be that place where comfort can sometimes hurt us much more so than propel us to become even more and to create the kind of life that we were really meant to live. So I think comfort can be a tricky thing. When it comes to the support and the structure, yes and no. When I said, you will lose friends, I want to clarify that because it's not, again, I don't want to buy into the stigma or continue the narrative that's always the case. Mm-hmm. I think it depends on the society that you're a part of and the community that you're a part of in that moment, because there are some that come from a perspective that the only way to do life is X, Y, and Z. And that means partnered, and that means commitment for life, and that means all these other things. Well, when you break those rules, there is a fallout that happens. And I would argue that when those are the friendships that you lose, can we really define those as friends in the first place? Or perhaps was that part of the comfort that we experienced because there was so much sameness in that environment? So it's a deeper question, when you get into that stuff. So all of that to say, yes and no is the short answer.
So let's
How's
talk
that for a
about
very
this.
rambly idea to get to yes and no?
You're not rambly. You're amazing. And Jorge, I see you over there in Puerto Rico. I also see you, John Bond, Dorothy, Helen, Kelly, Jasmine. I mean, Donna, Chase. They're all Michelle. Good to see you. Everybody's tuning in. So, single parent summit. What was the impetus for this? And what I know there's a website, so I'm gonna flash the website on the screen. But what happens when we go there?
So what happens when you go there? So the single parent summit. I'll take your first question. Wow, yeah, the first question first. That was tricky to say for some reason. It came into being because I couldn't find what I needed 10 years ago. And there was this piece of, if I can condense the journey and synthesize the experience for the last 10 years so that I can help someone else get there faster, then I call that a win. Yeah. Again, I mentioned, I am totally this Pollyanna, the silver lining is out there somewhere. You just might have to look really hard for it. And for me, it's a way to validate all the hell that I went through. And so much of it that was self-inflicted, and I just didn't know any better at the time. So if there is a way that I can help another single parent or blended family or co-parenting situation to help them tap into who they are faster and to connect with themselves and to pull in that kind of pull all the pieces of yourself back together and rebuild stronger. If we can get there faster, that is absolutely a win, and it justifies and validates the entire experience as far as I'm concerned. But again, that's only one piece of the puzzle. Yeah. What really gets me going about this whole idea is because I think it was Dorothy that mentioned earlier the idea that as we do this ourselves, as we experience this kind of insight and up-leveling, our kids are seeing it, and then we're talking about impacting an entire generation. That's the stuff that really gets me excited about this. So all of that to say, when you go to thesingleparentsummit.com, first of all, you're going to see that we're doing something fun for Single Parent Day. And this, I started this project 2 years ago. It'll be 3 years this summer. And it started with a virtual summit. And this was kind of crazy. So I was full time in weddings at this point, and like I said, a friend kind of threw the gauntlet out of like, hey, you should do something for single parents. But I knew that my schedule was crazy with weddings, and I thought, well, if I'm going to do this, it needs to be right now, and it has to happen in the next 7 weeks. So I went from idea to execution in 7 weeks, and we had 45 speakers and over 11 days worth of programming. That was
Amazing.
craziness, absolutely crazy. But it
Amazing.
was such a great experience to be able to have these conversations, to be like, let's talk about what it's really like to be a single parent. What is your co-parenting dynamic like? What are the things that you wish you would have known? How can we help, change the narrative and really expand this idea of creating something that we choose as opposed to just what was given to us.
And
So, oops, sorry. So now we have this mini summit that we're doing, and there are 10 other members that I've chosen as the Single Parent Summit Council, of which I might say that Marc Cordon is one. And I'm so excited about this because I think, especially like your story, just it warms my heart every time you tell me, man, everybody sees me as this like hyped up golden mic guy. But as soon as I start talking about my son with you, everything changes. I love that. I love that we get to see that side of you as being, look at you blush,
yeah,
seeing that side in the Single Parent Summit. And so it's just super practical. Like, yeah, there's going to be inspiration because we can't help it, because that's just the type of people that we are. But it's also this idea of like, let's really talk about this and not just, pretend that we don't exist, or, that everything is hunky dory all the time.
it's been amazing. I know just for my development as a father, and see, you make me break character every damn time, even on my own show. But like for
I
my
love
development,
you.
for my development as a father, sort of it's sort of ridden with guilt, and it's ridden with happiness and sadness. But just to know that there's folks on this board, it's a very diverse board, and the stories that I hear other people tell, I am definitely not walking alone, and it
Yeah.
feels really good to it feels really good to celebrate this kind of day, because people single parents should be like given a pat on the back. This is us getting the
Right?
card, right? Like, thank you for the single
Yeah.
parentness. So yeah, and you also have a board, and the board is a very diverse board, just like the stories that you're going to get in the single parent summit, right?
Yeah. And that was really, really important to me because I think sometimes, again, this idea, this allure of being a victim,
Yeah,
it's so easy to hear parenting advice or even household management, or, like that whole adulting 101 thing, the
yeah.
things that we're supposed to do as grown-ups, which whoever decided that we all get to be grown-ups. But with this idea, it's so easy to become the victim in this space. But when you're seeing someone who matches you on the panel and being able to talk about who you are in this role of single parent, if I can find someone who has the same schedule that I do, or comes from the same background or the same belief system, then all of a sudden my excuses to not show up to be the person that I know I can be, my excuses are not as valid anymore. And I'm not as inclined to be the victim, because if they can do it, so can I. But if you're only
Hmm.
ever going to look at the partnered hetero family as being this gold standard, then you're going to be able to separate from that really easily and say, oh, well, that might work for them, but, they've got two income earners, or, they've got the great house in the suburbs, or whatever the excuse might be. And we separate from that potential. So having a very specific, diverse council was really important to me.
It's freaking awesome. It's freaking awesome. On this single parents National Single Parents Day, go and check out the singleparentsummit.com. Not single parent summit, the singleparentsummit.com. It's on there right now, spelled correctly for you. So all you gotta do is click the link. There's some fun things. Also, at the same time, Tonia, thank you for doing this. For those of us watching here in the party, I see you guys watching in the party. Those of us who are watching live, share this one out. Share this one out to other single parents who don't even know that today is a day that's celebrating them. Take a couple
Yeah.
seconds to recognize them, and what they've done for you, for us, or what you're doing for another person. Tanya, we'll have you back on. It's been amazing. You've said enough. You've said enough. I'm gonna do this right now. So you know why it's called the Golden Mic? Because there's a Golden Mic in Baltimore, backstage, coming down um, on the single parent National Single Parent Day, and this Golden Mic is stopping right in front of you. It translates in every single language all across the world, which means everyone is listening. Tonia, your Golden Mic is live now.
You've got this. You are so much more capable than you've been led to believe. And if you can take a minute and recognize how far you've come and the kind of impact that you've had on your kids, and sit with the dreams that you have as a parent, and know that there is a community that's got your back and that's been where you are, and we can help shape some of the learning off the curve, come join us, first of all, because we can't wait to meet you. But secondly, just know that you're where you need to be. There's no roadmap that you have to follow. You're exactly where you need to be, and you get to decide where you go next.
Tonia, I know
Drop
you're a,
mic.
I know you're a tiny person, but I want you to feel the weight of that golden mic. I want you to hold that golden mic in front of you right now. And I want you to smash that golden mic like it's hot, because you just destroyed this party,
Done.
baby. This has been episode 133, celebrating National Single Parent Day with my sister from another mister, Tonia Adleta, Marc Cordon, and we have two final questions for you. If you're feeling good and you're living life to its fullest potential, what is your responsibility to change history for the better, especially our single parents?
I love that.
TheSingleParentSummit.com. Thanks. Thanks, Tonia.
Thank you.